From the start, I need you to understand something. I adored my wife. We'd been inseparable since we were just kids. Back in junior high, we were best friends, partners, and everything. As teenagers, we were just two kids who leaned on each other. But when we turned 18, friendship slowly turned into something more. Something neither of us really knew how to handle. The name's Cal Wilson. I'm about 5'10" and weigh somewhere around 180 pounds. I don't obsess over the number. I stay pretty fit for a guy pushing 32, thanks to years of running track in high school and college. Still keep up the habit every morning. My hair's dark brown, though streaked with gray earlier than I'd like. But people tell me my green eyes make up for it. I work as a detective for our small-town police department, which, honestly, doesn't deal with much beyond petty theft and the occasional bar fight. My wife? Julie Wilson. Maiden name, Julie Vickers. People always said we were perfect for each other, and for a while I believed them. She's breathtaking. Long blonde hair, those sharp blue eyes, and a smile that could knock the wind out of you. Julie's also 32, and after finishing college together, we tied the knot. We built a life, simple, steady, full of love. I took her out often, not just on holidays. I never wanted her to forget how much she meant to me. She worked as a paralegal at one of the 2 law offices in town. Nothing glamorous, but it suited her. Then there was Jimmy Green. Everyone in town knows Jimmy. Back in the day, he was the golden boy, star quarterback, hometown hero, the guy who always landed on his feet. But a bad knee wrecked his football career, and when he returned home, his father, the mayor, handed him a job at City Hall. He and the sheriff's department worked together a lot, so I couldn't exactly avoid him. Jimmy had always had a thing for Julie. In high school, he'd even double date with us and still flirt with her right in front of me and his then-girlfriend, Cynthia. Julie, bless her, never played along, though sometimes the comments made her cheeks flush and my blood boil. I warned Jimmy more than once to knock it off, but he always laughed it off like it was harmless. Eventually, he married Cynthia and settled into his cushy town hall job. But Jimmy isn't just some old story. No, he's woven into all this in ways I'll get to. About a year ago, Julie and I had a rare Friday night to ourselves. We had plans, just the 2 of us, but like always, duty called. Sheriff Barton rang me up, apologizing for ruining my day off, but saying he needed someone to respond to a domestic disturbance near our place. All the patrol units were tied up, and I was closest. Barton wasn't really asking. When he wanted you on something, you did it. I sighed, kissed Julie goodbye, strapped on my badge and sidearm, and headed out. It was the same old scene at the Roberts place. Sue Roberts was in tears, telling me her husband, Hunter, had gotten drunk and violent again. Their kids huddled behind her. I spent what felt like hours calming Hunter down and hauling him to the station. And like clockwork, Sue refused to press charges, promising yet again that this time would be different, that she'd get rid of the booze and get help. I'd heard it all before. Same promises, same outcome. It was getting harder to believe her. That night, though, something felt off. By the time I finished paperwork, it was nearly midnight. When I walked through the door, there was Jimmy, sitting on our couch like he belonged there, chatting with Julie. She looked freshly showered, too, like she'd gotten ready all over again after I left. The hair on my neck stood up. What the hell was Jimmy doing in my house? Trying to keep it together, I leaned in and kissed Julie. Sorry about tonight, babe. Hunter's behind bars again. Maybe this time Sue will finally wise up. Julie smiled like nothing was out of the ordinary. It's okay, sweetie. Jimmy called after you left. Since Cynthia's visiting family, he wondered if we were up to anything tonight. Jimmy threw in a shrug. Didn't mean to crash date night, man. Guess I got lucky you were called out. His cocky little grin made me want to throw him out right then and there, but I kept it civil. Well, sorry to hear about Cynthia, I said, forcing a smile. But if you don't mind, I'd like to spend what's left of the night alone with my wife. Jimmy caught the hint. Right, sure. My bad. He bolted for the door. Once he was gone, I turned to Julie. Look, I'm sorry again. Next time Barton calls, I'll make sure someone else handles it. Julie just laughed softly. She knew the life of a cop's wife. It's fine. We were just catching up, nothing more. I wanted to believe her. I did. I trusted Julie for more years than I could count. And yet, those alarms in my head didn't shut off so easily. Little did I know, this was just the start. The next couple of months were rough. Julie and I managed to squeeze in just 2 dates without me getting called away. Tension was thick between us. She was frustrated and so was I. But while I blamed the job, she blamed me. From her perspective, it wasn't the badge taking me away. It was me choosing it over her. And honestly, I couldn't even argue with that. Cynthia, Jimmy's wife, had also been gone more frequently. Ever since her folks moved to the city, she'd been visiting them on weekends, leaving Jimmy behind. One Sunday morning, earlier than expected, Cynthia returned, and before I even had my first coffee, she was blowing up my phone. "Detective Wilson," I answered, my usual work voice kicking in. "Cal, thank God," she said, breathless, panicked. "I need you to come, right now." "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly alert. "Just come to my house," she pleaded. "Not our house," she meant hers. That was the first red flag. I told Barton I needed to step away, and although he gave me a strange look, he waved me off and went back to his crossword. I didn't ask questions, I just grabbed my keys and drove straight over. When I pulled up, the sight of Julie's car parked in front hit me like a gut punch. Cynthia was pacing on the front lawn, visibly shaken, tears streaming down her face. The warning bells in my head weren't bells anymore. They were sirens. "Cal, thank God you're here," she said, throwing herself into my arms. I steadied her. "Take a breath, Cyn. Tell me what's going on." She glanced nervously at Julie's car. The color drained from her face. "You don't know?" she whispered. I frowned. "Don't know what? Why is my wife's car here?" Her wide, terrified eyes told me everything before she even spoke. "No, you don't know?" she repeated, like she could hardly process it herself. My blood boiled. "What the hell is going on here, Cynthia?" Then it hit me, hard. Without another word, I stormed inside, hand instinctively resting on my sidearm. I flung open the bedroom door, and there they were, frozen like kids caught sneaking out after curfew. Julie, Jimmy, together, in my bed. I lowered my hand and slowly holstered my tool. No need for that. Not yet. Instead, I calmly pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures. I got 4 shots before they even realized what was happening. Julie scrambled to cover herself. "Cal, wait! I can explain." I ignored her, stepping back toward the hallway. "Cynthia," I called out, "did you know about this?" Tears welled up in her eyes again. "Yes. I thought you knew, too. Julie told me you were aware, said you didn't mind her spending time with Jimmy while you worked." "You thought I knew?" I asked, trying to steady my breathing. "I wasn't happy about it," she admitted, "but I trusted her. I thought you did, too. I only realized how far it had gone when I walked in today and saw that." I took a deep breath, and an idea flickered. "All right," I said quietly. "Cyn, how about you come stay at my place for a while?" Julie and Jimmy both snapped at once. "No, you're not taking her anywhere!" they shouted, practically in unison. Cynthia looked at them like they were trash. Then she turned to me and said, without hesitation, "You know what? Yeah, take me." Jimmy shot up, furious. "Hell no!" He started toward me. I raised my hand and didn't even have to unholster. "Back off, Jimmy. Funny how you two have been playing house behind my back, but suddenly you've got opinions about where Cynthia goes?" Jimmy clenched his fists, but didn't move. "How long's it been?" I asked him. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" Jimmy's bravado cracked. 2 months, he muttered, "since the night you got called to Sue and Hunter's." I nodded. "Right, figures." Julie reached out, desperate. "Cal, please, I still love you. This was just... You still love me?" I snapped. "So you cheat on me but still expect to keep me?" I glanced at Cynthia. Dark hair, piercing green eyes, standing there quietly, dignified. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been blind, focusing so hard on Julie all these years that I'd barely noticed anyone else. But now, I saw Cynthia differently. I looked back at Julie. "You hate double standards, don't you? Well, here's one. If you can betray me with Jimmy, why can't I return the favor with Cynthia? Seems fair." "Don't you dare!" Jimmy roared, stepping forward again. I held his stare without flinching. "What's good for the goose, Jimmy?" Cynthia smirked, wiping away her tears. "Yeah, I think I'd like to go." Julie exploded. "This is ridiculous!" But Cynthia ignored her, walking over to the dresser. "I'm grabbing a few things, Cal." I turned back to Julie. "Tell me the truth. What's the real reason?" "You," she spat. "Your damn job, you're never around." "Jimmy is." "So you took him into our bed to fix that." Julie flinched. Shame started to creep in, but it was too late. "Yes," she whispered. "Great," I said, voice flat. "Perfect for the bonfire." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "When were you going to tell me?" I pressed. "Or were you just hoping I'd keep being the fool?" Tears ran down her cheeks now. "I still love you, Cal. I didn't want this." I shook my head. "Don't kid yourself, Julie. You don't love me, not if you could do this." Cynthia slammed the dresser shut. I'm going with Cal, and Jimmy, stay the hell away from me until I figure out what happens next. Neither of them had anything left to say, and just like that, everything changed. Cynthia and I made it to my car without any drama. But before we even reached the driveway at my place, my phone started blowing up. Julie kept calling, but I let it ring. The only call I answered was from Sheriff Barton. "Cal, you all right? Jimmy just called me," Barton said, voice laced with concern. Barton wasn't just my boss. He was Jimmy's uncle. "Sir," I replied calmly, though my blood was boiling. "Turns out your nephew has been playing house with my wife behind my back for 2 months. Cynthia just clued me in. We're on the way to my place now. I'm taking the rest of the day and tomorrow off." I sent him a few of the photos I'd taken as proof. There was a heavy sigh on the line. "Damn! I was afraid something like this might happen." I slammed the brakes mentally. "Wait, you knew?" I barked. He paused. "Cal, listen!" "Save it," I snapped, and ended the call without another word. I turned to Cynthia. "Did you know he knew?" Her eyes widened. "Hell no," she said, seething now. "Unbelievable." Now she wasn't just upset, she was furious. And oddly enough, that fire in her voice stirred something in me. For the first time, I wasn't just looking at Cynthia as my friend's wife. "You're damn right. We're going to get serious about this," I said with a smirk. She caught my glance, and for a split second, the tension between us shifted. But first, I had things to handle. As soon as we got to my house, Julie's number flashed on my screen again. This time I picked up. "What?" I snapped. "Don't you dare, Calvin Wilson," she shouted. "You better not lay a finger on her or I'll file for divorce." I gritted my teeth. "Julie, I've got photos. You know what that means in this state? Infidelity? You lose everything in a divorce." Her silence was deafening. "Finally," she whispered. "Okay." Then hung up. I immediately texted her, "Don't come home tonight." Then I dialed Dennis, my cousin, and the town's most trusted locksmith. I knew I could count on him. When he showed up, Cynthia and I were sharing a quiet beer on the porch. "Hey, Dan," I greeted as he stepped out of his truck. "What's going on, man?" he asked, spotting Cynthia and raising a brow. I gave him the short version and told him to rekey the house. 3 sets only. 1 for me, 1 for Cynthia, 1 spare. "And don't hand a key to Julie if she shows up asking for one." Dennis chuckled. "Family first, brother." He went to work without another word. Next, I made another call, seeing the furniture store. I ordered a brand new double bed to replace the one Julie and I had been sharing. When the movers arrived, Cynthia stayed quiet, watching as they tore down the old bed and tossed it into a heap out back, just like I asked. The new one wasn't cheap, but it felt necessary. I had more than just revenge on my mind. I had a plan, actually, several plans, and I prayed I wouldn't need the violent ones. By late afternoon, Dennis handed me the keys. I gave one to Cynthia with a playful wink, and to my surprise, she returned it with a shy smile. When the movers finished, I settled up, then made one last call. To my sister Olivia, who happened to run the local bank. Liv wasn't exactly Julie's biggest fan. "I need a new account, Liv. Monday morning transfer 75% from the joint accounts. I'll explain later." "About time," she said, half joking, half serious. "Consider it done." With the house now secured, the outsiders gone, and Cynthia still sitting quietly beside me, the atmosphere shifted. I didn't drag her straight to bed. Instead, we settled into the living room, locking the world outside. "Cynthia," I said seriously, "what we're about to do here, it's revenge, plain and simple. You realize that, right?" She nodded. "I know, but before we go further, I need you to understand something." I took her hand gently. "Cyn, you've put up with too much for too long. Why didn't you leave him?" Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. "He controls everything, Cal. The bank accounts, the house. He said if I walked, I'd get nothing. He's got every lawyer in his back pocket." I gritted my teeth. "He's feeding you lies. Listen to me. Do you want out? Forget the money. Forget him. Yes or no? Do you want out?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Not just because of the cheating." Her voice cracked as she rolled up her sleeve and revealed a dark bruise on her arm. I swore under my breath. "That son of a—" I caught myself. "Cynthia, you're getting out of this. I'll make sure of it." Reality hit hard. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. And Jimmy? He wasn't walking away clean. "I'm no rookie," I said firmly. "Tomorrow, I'll call a lawyer from Julie's rival firm. Barton can't fire me, even if he wants to. I've got leverage now. I've got Barton's dirty little secret. He knew about you two and kept me on duty anyway." Cynthia wiped her tears. eyes glistening with something I hadn't seen all day. Hope. Cal, she whispered, would you really help me, even after all this? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. You had no idea I didn't know. You were dragged into this mess too. But now that we both know, we're going to handle it. Together. I leaned back. And I like you, Cynthia. I've liked you for years, if I'm honest. You've been one of the few people who's never let me down. Her blush deepened. Cal, you've always been good to me. Even when I felt trapped, I nodded. Starting tomorrow, you're going to get free of him. With the photos I have, the bruises you're carrying, and the sheriff's complicity, you'll have a case strong enough to bring the whole damn courthouse to its knees. For the first time all day, she smiled genuinely. You really think we can do this? I grinned. Oh, we're past con. It's happening. She laughed softly. Guess I'm about to get my revenge. The real kind. Not just the petty kind. No, this wasn't just payback anymore. This was about taking back control. And for the first time, I saw Cynthia in a light I hadn't before. Strong, determined, and absolutely worth fighting for. Just as we were settling in, my phone buzzed. I had already switched it to vibrate so it didn't disturb the silence. One glance, and of course, it was Julie. I chuckled bitterly and picked up. What now, Julie? I asked, not hiding my irritation. Cal, we can still fix this. Please, let's talk, she whined. That whiny tone had always grated on me, but now it felt unbearable. Oh yeah? Does fixing this include you quitting the cheating? I shot back. There was a pause. I didn't even wait. I ended the call and powered the phone off before she could try again. What did she say? Cynthia asked, watching me carefully. I shrugged. She said enough, Cynthia sighed. We need to figure out what's next. I can't go back to Jimmy. Not after this. Truth is, I haven't been happy with him for a long time. This just made me realize how done I am. As the anger from earlier simmered, it shifted into something sharper. Barton, that bastard, had manipulated this entire situation. He knew about Jimmy and Julie, yet he kept me busy and out of the way. And Julie, she could have shut this down at any point. She chose not to. We'd both been betrayed, but somehow I still ended up the bigger fool. I shared my thoughts with Cynthia, and guilt flickered across her face. I'm sorry, Cal, she whispered, gently brushing her fingers across my cheek. But tell me something. When Julie said I was okay with all this, how exactly did she put it? I needed to know what kind of lie Julie had spun. She told me you and I felt the same, Cynthia said. That even if we didn't like it, we both accepted it because you understood she had needs. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'll handle this, I said. Time to put my detective badge to good use. I laid out a rough plan. Cynthia listened intently, then gave me a half laugh, half sigh. You're a devious son of a tool, she said with a mischievous spark. But I love you anyway. And you, Cynthia Green, are every bit the goddess I've always suspected you were, I said without hesitation. And I love you too. We spent the rest of the day together. After freshening up, we ended up in the kitchen where Cynthia made dinner. Pork chops with roasted vegetables, all seasoned better than any meal I could remember. I complimented her cooking, honestly surprised. I even joked that she put Julie's kitchen skills to shame. Later that evening, we sat at the table, mapping out our next moves. The more we talked, the more I realized something strange. I didn't hate Julie. I resented her, sure, but somehow the anger felt duller now. Maybe because, in the mess of it all, she had unknowingly pushed Cynthia and me together. But then, like clockwork, the image of Julie and Jimmy flashed back in my mind, and the anger returned, sharp as ever. I swore she wouldn't get a damn thing from me beyond what the court ordered after those photos hit the courtroom. That night, Cynthia and I fell asleep, tangled in each other's arms. Julie always hated cuddling, but Cynthia? She fit perfectly beside me. Like that's where she was always meant to be. If there was any silver lining, it was that neither of us had children to complicate the fallout. Julie always claimed we weren't ready, wanting to save more before trying for a baby. Cynthia, on the other hand, had no interest in having kids with Jimmy, and after the last 2 months, she was grateful for it. Cynthia worked as a real estate agent, and with the market booming, she was doing well. The trick now was figuring out how to access her share of their joint accounts. I wanted Liv, my sister, to help, but I didn't want her dragged too deep into this if it backfired. Thankfully, Cynthia had all her pay stubs and transaction records, enough to build a case for her share. With our plans shaping up, we hit the road early the next morning and headed straight to see Phil, my brother-in-law, Liv's husband, and one hell of a lawyer. He agreed to take both of our divorce cases practically for free. In truth, he was thrilled. Jimmy had once made a pass at Liv, and Phil had never forgotten it. Phil drafted the papers immediately. I handed over the photos and outlined everything Cynthia and I knew. The timestamps and Jimmy's own admissions would be enough to give us leverage. Phil promised to prepare everything for service by the next day, and even dig up more dirt on Jimmy and Julie while he was at it. By Tuesday, Cynthia and I were standing inside Sheriff Barton's office. "Morning, Bart," I greeted, calm as could be, Cynthia right behind me. He looked up, clueless at first. I slid my phone across his desk with the photos queued up. "Give it a second," I said. "It'll make sense." I turned to Cynthia. "Show him." Without flinching, Cynthia pulled back her sleeve, revealing the bruise on her arm. "Jimmy does this," she said flatly. "It's a regular thing, but this time I'm pressing charges." Barton shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe you banged into a—" "Enough," I cut him off sharply. "You're going to arrest Jimmy. Today. Then you're going to march yourself over to the DA's office and file the charges properly. Otherwise, those photos? They'll be on every bulletin board in City Hall and all over the internet before sundown." Barton knew I wasn't bluffing. I leaned in. "And before we're done, you're going to tell me exactly how deep you are in this. If you don't, I'll make sure your name gets tied to this whole dirty mess. No more hiding behind badges and bloodlines." He paled. I could see it. The weight of this was finally sinking in, and I wasn't backing down. Sheriff Barton was visibly restless. I noticed the tension the second I stepped in. Quietly, I activated the recorder hidden in my pocket, just in time for him to start pouring it all out. He admitted that he had royally screwed up. The whole thing, according to him, was a mistake he deeply regretted. Barton explained how Jimmy, Fred, and even the mayor pressured him into keeping me conveniently out of the way. Jimmy had convinced him that he and Julie were in love, but they didn't want to break up the marriage. Instead, they just wanted me to stay distracted enough to let them sneak around. Barton, claiming he trusted that Jimmy and Julie had worked it out with me, had gone along with it. What hit hardest wasn't even that they lied. It was that Barton, someone I considered close, went along willingly. He swore that Cynthia knew, so he simply assumed I knew too. His voice cracked with regret, but it was too late for regrets. "I always thought you were family, Bart," I said coldly. "Guess I got that wrong." The more I listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about setting things right. When I pressed him about who else was involved, Barton panicked for a second. He knew there was no point in lying. "Jimmy, Fred, and a couple more on Jimmy's side," he finally admitted. "That told me everything. The whole rotten inner circle was in on it." I didn't flinch. "Mayor Green knew," I said. "Judge Green too, right?" Barton, cornered, gave a slow nod. I already knew what to do with this information. Their wives were going to find out. Janet Green had been a friend of my parents for years. She deserved the truth. And even though Judge Green's wife had never been my favorite person, she didn't deserve to be left in the dark either. Before I could even process my next move, my phone buzzed. "Julie." "Of course," I picked up calmly. "Detective Wilson." Julie sounded sweet, almost casual, asking if I was still at work. I told her I was finishing paperwork with Barton. Then she dropped the line I wasn't expecting, saying she still loved me and knew I still loved her. And damn it, for a second I realized she wasn't entirely wrong. I still felt something, but it wasn't enough. I agreed to meet. "You can come by," I said, "but I changed the locks. Cynthia's with me today." Julie hesitated and simply said, "Fine," before hanging up. I turned back to Barton. "So it's just you, Jimmy, Fred, the mayor, and the judge?" He nodded. "That's everyone." Then he tried making small talk with Cynthia, but I cut him off sharply. He didn't need to know more about her. Not now. I reminded him that Jimmy had been keeping Cynthia financially trapped, and that Barton was going to send every scrap of evidence to the DA. No exceptions. Without arguing, Barton got to work. He documented Cynthia's bruises, uploaded the photos, and prepared the case. He promised to deliver everything to the DA right after arresting Jimmy, swearing he would handle it discreetly. I made it clear. "You'll have to. I don't trust anyone else in this town to." Barton's voice dropped. He admitted he couldn't defend Jimmy's actions, not after what he did to me, or to Cynthia. He promised he'd see it through. But this time, I wasn't leaving it up to him alone. No more sweeping anything under the rug. Not anymore. Sheriff Barton's words still lingered in my head as I left. I'd known Bart practically all my life, respected him, trusted him, until yesterday. Now, all I saw was betrayal buried under layers of guilt. I told him I believed him, shook his hand, and made it clear that my next step was to deal with Julie and get her out of my house. Barton asked if I'd be around tomorrow, but I informed him I was officially taking a 5-day vacation and wouldn't be back until Monday. He gave me a small nod, and I could tell he hoped things would settle by the time I returned. What he didn't know was that I wasn't even close to finished. As promised, I had already scheduled emails to Mayor Green and Mrs. Green, each containing every damning JPEG I had. They were timed to hit inboxes just as Barton cuffed his nephew. When Cynthia and I pulled up to the house, Julie was already there, standing by the door. Sin and I walked up hand in hand, and it was impossible to miss the jealousy flashing across Julie's face. Cynthia greeted her without hesitation, asking if she liked her husband. Julie, with that same old smirk, threw back an insult, calling Sin a hoe. Typical. I found myself for the first time looking at them side by side and realizing how much more radiant Cynthia seemed, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. I calmly reminded Julie of her hypocrisy, pointing out that if she hadn't betrayed me with Jimmy, I wouldn't be standing there holding Cynthia's hand. That silenced her immediately. I didn't stop. I told her there wasn't anything left to discuss. I reminded her that instead of owning up to her betrayal, she chose to attack me, my job, and my character. She wasn't interested in fixing anything. She was only interested in justifying herself. Julie broke down, sobbing. She apologized through the tears, genuinely crumbling in front of us. I'd only seen her cry like that a few times, but this wasn't one of those situations where tears would change a thing. She admitted she ruined everything. But in truth, she didn't just ruin it. She destroyed it. I calmly informed her that Jimmy hadn't only betrayed me, but that he'd been beating Cynthia too. I motioned to Cynthia, who quietly showed the bruise on her arm. The realization hit Julie like a brick wall. She stammered that she had no idea, horrified. Cynthia brushed it off and told Julie not to worry about it anymore. She made it clear that she was finally going to do what she should have done long ago, divorce Jimmy and take him for everything he was worth. I backed her up. Me too, I added, looking Julie dead in the eyes. It was time to lay it all out. I told Julie that we were finished and that I was going after 75% of the assets. She could keep her car, I'd keep mine, and she'd have enough for a down payment on a place of her own. But if she pushed me, if she even thought about dragging this out, those photos would find their way to every family member and friend we had. I left no doubt. I'd prefer a clean ending, but I wasn't afraid to get ugly if I had to. Julie, still sniffling, whispered that she loved me. I shut it down. I told her plainly that love without respect meant nothing. As far as I was concerned, I divorced her the moment I saw her and Jimmy together. The court paperwork was just the final nail in the coffin. I added that my lawyer already had the evidence and that it would be in court first thing. Then I asked the only thing left. Would she agree to the divorce? Eyes downcast, voice hollow, she simply said yes. I thanked her, though the words felt like dust in my mouth. I offered her a practical solution, to gather her things and avoid Jimmy's place for now, considering he'd just been arrested for domestic violence. She nodded, agreeing. She quietly asked where she was supposed to go now. I told her that the joint account was still hers, minus the 75% I had legally moved to my new account. There was enough left for a new apartment and some breathing room. I wished her well. Honestly, as much as I wanted to hate her, I couldn't. We had too much history, but forgiveness? That was never coming. Julie's face fell. I could see the weight of it all landing on her shoulders, but I stayed firm. Part of me still wanted to comfort her, to pretend we could patch things up. But deep down, I knew better. If she truly loved me, she never would have crossed that line. As I stood there, I realized she might still be beautiful in the eyes of many. But to me, the spell was broken. By the time Cynthia and I finished helping Julie pack up her things, the entire house felt like a moving truck exploded inside it. Every closet, dresser, nightstand, vanity, and bathroom shelf had been emptied. Piles of suitcases now sat in the living room, most of them crammed with Julie's stuff. What was supposed to be a quick task ended up dragging on all day. It was way too late to help her find a new place, and frankly, neither of us had the energy left to try. We both collapsed onto the couch, surrounded by chaos. Cynthia handed me and Julie each a beer before settling on my lap, and without meaning to, I let out a small chuckle. I didn't realize you had so much stuff, Jules, I said, half laughing. Julie just shrugged with a distant look. There was no anger in her expression, just sadness, the realization of everything she was leaving behind. She mentioned that she had been living here for over a decade and never threw anything away unless it was absolutely useless. I already knew that about her, but hearing it now felt different, sadder. I decided to offer her at least one mercy. Julie, you can crash in the guest room tonight. Just pack the car tomorrow and deal with the rest then. Cynthia leaned in and whispered if that was really a good idea, but I shrugged. I didn't hate Julie. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. I didn't love her anymore, but I still cared. Or at least cared enough to give her one final night under the roof that used to be ours. Julie, trying to hold herself together, quietly accepted. She even asked if we could just sign the divorce papers tomorrow at the lawyer's office instead of dragging this out. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to make her sweat, to really feel what she did to me. But when I looked at her, at the shell of the woman I used to love, I realized she was already drowning. I asked Cynthia for her opinion. Without hesitation, she said Julie had suffered enough and that it would probably work out fine. I agreed. All right, tomorrow we go to Phil's office. You'll sign and we'll ask the judge to finalize it. At least there would be no counseling, no custody battles, just signatures and a clean break. Julie gave a weak, relieved smile. She knew I could have made it worse. Truthfully, the worst was still to come, and not from me. She glanced around the room. I see you've already replaced the bed, I grinned. Yeah, figured it was time for an upgrade. Although if I'd known Cynthia likes to cuddle, I might have picked something smaller. Julie visibly flinched. She wasn't used to me playing the sharp edge so directly. Her voice wavered. I guess I wasn't such a good wife, was I? I didn't sugarcoat it. You were, until you picked Jimmy Green of all people. You knew exactly how I felt about him. And now, the clock's ticking. When this divorce is done, I suggest you leave town. Fast. Fear flickered across her face. What are you saying, Cal? I'm saying there's a storm coming, Julie. When a mayor lets his own son wreck another man's home and turns a blind eye, people notice. Consequences are coming, and maybe not illegal ones, but consequences nonetheless. I was bluffing, of course. I wasn't going to expose Bart. He still had a soul, and that counted for something. But I needed Julie to believe it. I laid it on thick, explaining how the mayor had conveniently scheduled me for Friday nights and busy Sundays, knowing full well that Jimmy was exploiting those gaps. Julie's eyes widened, and reality hit her like a freight train. Jimmy used his own father to set us both up, she muttered. It all started to click for her. Jimmy didn't just inherit the role of town's biggest jerk. He learned it from the best. The mayor himself. Before things could spiral further, I called Phil. I told him there was a change of plans. Julie would be coming by tomorrow to sign the papers. Phil agreed, but he warned me to make sure Julie brought her own lawyer to avoid complications. I relayed the message to her. She nodded quietly, showing no signs of protest. After finishing our beers, Cynthia and I retreated to the bedroom while Julie took the guest room. As Cynthia shut the door behind us, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't looking backward. I had this quiet, certain feeling. This bed wasn't just temporary. Cynthia and I, this might just be the start of something permanent. The next morning, Julie wasted no time. She called her lawyer and arranged to meet us at Phil's office. Once we got there and laid everything out, the betrayal, the evidence, the photos, her attorney kept a poker face, but it was clear he wasn't thrilled with what he saw. After going through the documents, he slid them back to Julie and simply said, "This is the best you're gonna get, Jules. Take it and walk away." And to her credit, she did. 30 days later, after the mandatory waiting period, the divorce was official. But ending things with Julie wasn't the real fight. The real battle was just getting started. And it wasn't about broken vows, it was about power. Jimmy Green, his father the mayor, and Barton were all tangled up in it, hiding behind City Hall. Fortunately, I had a secret tool. Janet Green, the mayor's wife and Jimmy's mother, responded to the letter I had sent, the one packed with undeniable proof. Alice Green, the judge's wife, stayed quiet, and I figured she was probably cooking up her own version of justice behind the scenes. In court, Judge Reinhold reviewed the evidence. Jimmy's skeletons finally tumbled out of the closet, including a hidden arrest record, freshly discovered thanks to Janet herself. He was slapped with house arrest without bail. He avoided jail time, but house arrest and public shame were enough for now. Phil, now representing Cynthia in her divorce, went directly after Jimmy's trust fund. Jimmy, like the fool he was, tried to resist the divorce, giving Phil every excuse to bring out the big tools. By the time Jimmy pled guilty to lesser charges, he was still stuck under house arrest and watching his finances slowly drain. Not perfect, but satisfying. Cynthia was living with me full-time now, and while I was at the station finishing paperwork, she called to let me know Janet Green was sitting in our living room. I told Barton, and he just gave me a knowing nod. No surprise there. When I got home, I found Cynthia and Janet calmly sipping coffee like it was any other Tuesday. Janet greeted me with a half smile and thanked me for the letter. If I had known my son and husband were up to this, I would have shut it down myself, she said, her voice steady. I reassured her that very few people actually knew what had been going on. Blaming herself wouldn't do any good, but Janet's demeanor hardened. She confessed that not only did her husband and brother-in-law know, but so did Barton. Jimmy, her own son, had gone too far this time, seducing another man's wife and manipulating half the town into covering for him. She swore she'd do whatever it took to help me and Cynthia. Cynthia gave her a heartfelt hug, grateful for the unexpected ally. Janet then asked if Phil might be willing to handle her own divorce. I said I was sure Phil could be convinced. Janet, with a soft chuckle, insisted I call her by her first name now. She didn't blink when I hinted that Cynthia and I were more than just roommates. In fact, she told us straight, after what Jimmy and Julie did to us, we deserved some happiness. Sure, I could have gone for a lawsuit against Jimmy, his father, and even Barton. Alienation of affection. Maybe even conspiracy. But most of the time, those cases were a waste of time. I had other plans. Far worse for Jimmy and his dear dad. After piecing everything together, the picture became clear. Mayor Green wasn't just passively involved, he was the architect. The man used his power to assign me to night shifts and weekend calls, leaving Julie wide open for Jimmy. I considered adding bribery and conspiracy charges to the list, but the judge, while morally weak, hadn't technically committed a crime beyond silence. Julie, for her part, left town soon after the divorce was finalized. I heard her boss pulled some strings to get her a job in another city. Smart move, considering the storm that was about to hit. Barton, to his credit, cooperated fully. He even apologized to my sister, admitting that the mayor had threatened his job if he didn't play along. For all his flaws, Barton was still a solid sheriff, unlike whatever clown the mayor would have installed in his place. Not long after, Barton and Janet joined Cynthia and me for dinner, over fried chicken, courtesy of Cynthia, who somehow managed to be both an incredible cook and the best partner I'd ever had. We talked about what came next. Bart still had that old guilt in his eyes, but he listened carefully as I laid out the plan. The deadline was moving up. We were going to hit Mayor Green hard, legally and publicly. Before the night ended, I called Phil to get a status update. His private investigator had dug up plenty of dirt, enough to finally bring down the so-called honorable mayor and his golden boy son. Janet, for the first time, looked at peace. For years, she had blamed herself for how Jimmy turned out. But after we reassured her that Jimmy was his father's creation, not hers, she finally let herself believe it. She even opened up about how her husband had changed, morphing from a kind-hearted man into a ruthless manipulator. She wasn't the only one who'd see him for who he really was. Pretty soon, the entire town would. They say power corrupts, but watching Mayor Green work, I knew that absolute power doesn't just corrupt. It rots from the inside out. For him, control wasn't about politics. It was about owning people. Using Jimmy as a puppet, he proved that even marriage vows were no obstacle to his schemes. As twisted as it sounds, I almost pitied Julie when I realized she'd been just another pawn in his game. But any sympathy died the moment Phil played us the recording he got from the private investigator. Hearing it made me sick. The conversation wasn't subtle. The mayor coldly ordered Jimmy to just give Cynthia what she wanted and run her out of town. Jimmy pushed back, insisting Cynthia was his to do with as he pleased. Green, unfazed, told him to lay low and promised he'd handle me personally, firing me if necessary and dragging Cynthia down with me. The worst part? He openly admitted to manipulating Barton to keep me out of the picture while Jimmy preyed on Julie. Jimmy, blind with entitlement, even accused his father of failing to correct Cynthia earlier, blaming him for letting her slip away. Phil stopped the tape. "That's collusion," Bart said, breaking the silence. Phil simply nodded. Then Bart turned to me. Care to do the honors, son? I grinned and checked my Colt. With pleasure. Turning to Cynthia, I softened. You stay here with Phil. Bart and I are about to put down some rabid dogs. Cynthia gripped me tight, kissing me like it might be the last time. Be careful. I love you. I love you too, I whispered back. Without wasting a second, Bart and I climbed into his cruiser, lights and sirens blaring as we sped towards the green estate. On the way, he secured an arrest warrant from Judge Reinhold thanks to the taped confession. When we arrived, we cut the sirens and rolled up quietly. Inside, the mayor and Jimmy were finishing dinner, completely unaware. Bart kicked in the door like the old-school sheriff he was, tool raised. The mayor stood up, stunned. What the hell is this? Jimmy's face drained of color as soon as he saw Bart's .44 and my .357 aimed directly at them. I kept Jimmy locked down while Bart advanced on the mayor. Frederick Green, you and your son are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, Bart announced, giving them their rights word for word before snapping the cuffs on tight. Once they were secured in Bart's charger, we headed back to the station. Jimmy, for once, kept his mouth shut. Fred was processed and locked up without incident. Jimmy, though, was saved for me. Inside the interrogation room, Cynthia sat silently beside me as I spread the paperwork on the table. I hit play on the tape, Jimmy's own voice confessing to the scheme, dripping with arrogance. As it played, he went pale. All the bravado drained right out of him. This isn't admissible, he stammered weakly. Doesn't matter, I shrugged. See, we don't even need court. We just need Homeland Security to hear it and think you're planning an execution. Pretty sure they'll be interested. I was bluffing hard, but Jimmy wasn't sharp enough to call it. He slumped in his chair, defeated. What do you want me to do? I didn't hold back. I laid it out clean. Once his lawyer arrived, he'd sign over everything to Cynthia. Assets, property, everything. After that, it would all go to the judge. He'd serve time, and when, or if, he got out, he'd start over with nothing. Jimmy just nodded, too broken to argue. Watching him crack was the most satisfying thing I'd felt in a long time. The self-proclaimed golden boy of our town had finally fallen. I leaned forward. You know, Jimmy, if you hadn't decided to screw my wife, none of this would have happened. He broke. He actually cried. I'd never seen Jimmy Green cry. Not in high school, not when his football career ended. Not even when he got arrested. But now? He was sobbing like a child. I glanced at Cynthia, who looked just as stunned as I did. Then Cynthia, cold and sharp, cut through the silence. Shut up, Jimmy. You and your father planned to kill me. You're not sorry. You're just sorry you got caught. The words hit him harder than a punch. Jimmy's eyes glassed over, staring at the wall like the weight of it all had finally crushed him. And honestly, it was about damn time. It didn't take long for Jimmy's lawyer to show up, and the second I played him the recording, he closed his eyes and sighed like a man who knew the inevitable had just landed on his desk. When I laid out my plan, spreading the tape to every local news outlet and even the major national stations, he quickly snapped Jimmy out of his dazed stupor. Within minutes, Jimmy signed the divorce papers without further resistance. Fred Green wasn't much different. Once his lawyer arrived and saw the same mountain of evidence, Fred signed as well. No arguments, no tantrums. And since we never promised to withhold anything, we hadn't written a single word about bargaining, we followed through on our original plan. The tapes were sent out far and wide. Local news, the big three national networks, Fox News, and even the state attorney general's office. It was like dropping a bomb in the middle of our little town. Within days, reporters swarmed the streets, satellite vans clogged the roads, and every cafe and motel in town was packed with journalists, state investigators, and feds. The town's bank account had never looked better thanks to the unexpected tourism. Everyone made a buck except Jimmy and Fred. The federal agents went deep. They unearthed all kinds of skeletons in Fred's closet. Questionable tax returns, money trails that didn't add up, and shady contracts tied to Jimmy's city hall dealings. By the time the dust settled, Bart managed to walk away clean. Jimmy and Fred tried to pin the worst of it on him, but the evidence didn't stick. He might have turned a blind eye once, but he hadn't committed any crimes. Julie wasn't so lucky. She got subpoenaed and dragged into court as a witness. The media vultures tore her apart at first, but I made sure the real story got out. I painted her, honestly, as a victim who'd been manipulated by the Green family just like everyone else. I was asked in one interview if I would have ever taken her back. Without hesitation, I answered no. I meant every word. As for Cynthia, She walked out of the divorce with everything: house, assets, and full freedom. Janet Green, the mayor's wife, did the same with Fred. Both women finally got justice. When sentencing came, Jimmy and Fred were hit hard. Conspiracy, corruption, and a few extra charges the feds found along the way. Odds are they'll never see daylight again. Not long after, Cynthia and I got married. Her family returned to town for the ceremony, filling the church with familiar faces. Julie even showed up with her new boyfriend, a genuinely decent guy, surprisingly. I had a quiet conversation with him, and I found myself wishing them well, which, to be honest, felt strange, but good. Word later got around that Jimmy, too, found companionship in prison, courtesy of a very large and affectionate cellmate. From what I heard, his attitude and bodily functions changed significantly by his 6th month inside. Meanwhile, Judge Roy Green, Jimmy's uncle, didn't escape the fallout. The feds started digging into his past and quickly uncovered a web of corruption, bribery, tampering, and questionable rulings. His own wife, Alice, ended up turning him in during their divorce. No one was sure if it was revenge or morality, but either way, she finished the job. Judge Green now calls a federal penitentiary home, while Fred, last I heard, found himself playing soprano roles in prison musicals. Fitting, Julie eventually remarried, the same man she brought to our wedding, and from what I hear, they're expecting their first child. I'm genuinely happy for her. Life has a strange way of balancing things out. Bart retired not long after everything settled. He and his wife are enjoying their quiet years, and while their kids are grown and gone, he still drops by the station occasionally. He never lost the habit. As for me, well, I was elected sheriff after Janet took over as mayor. Turns out the woman who once stood silently behind her husband had more backbone than anyone realized. The people trusted her, and when Bart stepped down, she handed me the badge. Now, sitting here years later, the chaos is behind me. I've got my young son in my arms while a very pregnant Cynthia feeds our little girl at the kitchen table. Life is peaceful. We turned the old guest room into a nursery, and our daughter already has her own room down the hall. 4 bedrooms, 1 busy household, and Cynthia's already put her foot down. This will be our last baby. She jokes that the factory is closing, but the playground stays open. I couldn't be happier. I love my wife. I love this life. And if there's one thing I've learned is that sometimes after the storm, you really do find the calm. I still find myself waking up some mornings thinking I'm back in that old life. Badge on the nightstand, Julie asleep beside me, the weight of silent resentments filling the room. But then I roll over and there's Cynthia, hair messy, breathing soft, a little drool on the pillow. And I remember that life is long gone. And thank God for that. The town changed too. Scars heal, but they don't disappear. You can still hear whispers about the green scandal at Tilly's Diner, or when the old-timers gather outside the hardware store. Some folks say I got lucky, that I somehow came out on top of all the mess. Others think I planned it all from the start. Truth is, I didn't plan a damn thing. I just got tired of watching people get away with it. Cynthia? She's a force of nature. She didn't just survive Jimmy, she rebuilt herself. She runs her own real estate firm now, took back control of her life piece by piece. Watching her grow into someone even stronger than she already was, that's been the real reward. As for me, I never asked to be sheriff, but the badge fits different now. It's not about power anymore. It's about keeping this town honest, even when it doesn't want to be. Janet, now mayor, keeps me on my toes. The two of us still meet every Thursday for coffee, swapping rumors, checking each other's blind spots. She always says the real reason she trusts me isn't because I exposed her husband and son. It's because I never gave up on Cynthia, even when I could have just walked away. Julie's name barely comes up these days. Last I heard, she and her new husband moved further south after their baby was born. Do I hate her? No, not anymore. I think part of me will always care, if only because of who we used to be. But I don't miss her. Not really. I miss the idea of her, the version of Julie that only ever existed in my head. Turns out she was never really that person. Life didn't just give me a second chance. It handed me the right one. And when I come home now, badge hung up by the door, boots kicked off, 2 kids screaming and Cynthia giving me that tired, knowing look, I realize I wouldn't trade this chaos for anything. Not for the smooth, quiet, picture-perfect marriage I thought I had. Not for a second. They say storms pass, but sometimes, when you're lucky, they also clear the air.